Hello and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. Before I begin my conversation with Merlyn Silva, I would like to just apologize for what you're about to hear. There are a few audio glitches going on in this episode on my end of the conversation. My microphone was crackling every once in a while, kind of often, enough to be annoying enough that I have to make this little announcement. I think it was something with my mic wire that was going wrong. Since switched it out, it sounds a lot better now. But while I'm having the conversation, I didn't realize this was going on. I actually found that if I added a little vinyl distortion in the background with some clicks and pops, like kind of like a record player, it sort of makes it more bearable. And I think it's sort of that psychological effect that we begin to tune things out after a while. So this conversation is going to have like a record crackle in the background, and I think it helps mask the annoying pops that happen in my end of the mic. I at least found it a lot easier to listen to, and I hope you agree. But the point here is that there are some imperfections in the audio, but there is a lot of great content. Merlyn Silva has got some amazing outlooks on the way he sees making music and teaching, and his productivity philosophy. There's a lot of great stuff there, and I don't want to lose that. So if you hear some vinyl crackling, which you will, it's there to help you tune out the annoying pops in my end of the recording. So without any more delay, let's get to the conversation with Merlyn Silva. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. This is Brian Funk. I make music as AfroDJMac, and today I'm very excited to get a chance to talk to Merlyn Silva. What's up, Merlyn?
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
I'm doing great.
So
man.
Cool to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a while. We've been kind of watching each other back and forth online, and it's nice to get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, 100%. It's so strange when you kind of, know a face from so many forums and like shared things that we do together, but, and then maybe like a year or so later actually getting to meet like in person over Skype, as it were. So yeah, really killer to touch base for the first time properly, man.
Yeah. So you are a producer, musician, songwriter, Ableton certified trainer, you're teaching. So how do you describe yourself and what you do? You want to maybe give us your little elevator pitch of your...
Yeah, 100%.
Like when people say, what do you do,
you
man?
just nailed it. Yeah. Well, mostly I sit around just kind of playing with live, and now somehow I've managed to make that into a job and into a living. But I teach at the Royal Academy of Music here in Denmark on the electronic line. It's called DM, the Danish Institute of Electronic Music. And I studied there for 4 years. And then when I finished last summer, they offered me a job as the coordinator. So I've taken on booking seminars and artists and, kind of getting people to come and play some concerts for us. And yeah, it's really, really cool to to go to the other side of the table and start a new job somewhere that you kind of feel really comfortable in already. And yeah, I'm a certified trainer, so I do a lot of kind of demos and, have one-on-one students and all that kind of jazz. And yeah, I make kind of glitchy, strange, psychedelic influenced like bass music and yeah, just kind of like fiddle around with live a lot. So lots of things going on, and I think that's really something that's a big thing in our time at the moment. Like, you can't really just focus on one thing these days. You have to really kind of spread yourself out and let different jobs or different hats influence each other. And I've really tried to be doing that in the last few years, just get as much. And of course, I'm at Warp Academy like yourself, so we also have that in common.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, you just gave me a lot of fuel and ammunition for questions. I want to ask you one thing real quick. One of the first things you said was like how you were at school and then you got hired. I guess my question would be sort of like, what'd you do? Why? How? Maybe like for the perspective of somebody looking to get work in, in music or in, the kind of stuff that you're doing. I mean, I think it's an interesting time. And, the more like old traditional ways of making it with music, air quotes, making it is, the just putting out music and touring. That has definitely changed a lot. And now there's a lot of other avenues to still do things with music where you're pursuing like a passion, but it's, maybe looks a little bit different than it did in the rock star days. So my question, I guess, is
100%. Yeah. And I mean, it's a shame as well,
yeah, it's changed, and I guess that is what it is. But you've managed to find a way to be successful at what you're doing. What kind of advice would you give someone? Okay, I'm asking you too many questions, but I want to know, like, first, like, why did you get picked? How did you get involved in that? And then, like, what kind of advice would you give somebody who might be coming out of school, and how do they get noticed and get some work through that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, really, I guess the back of this story is I did a degree when I was 21, like a bachelor's in drama. I didn't want to study music at the time. I've always played like guitar and been in bands. But I studied theatre, and it was awesome and really, really has benefited my life. But I never really thought about getting a job afterwards. I just cruised through university, had a great time partying and doing, I did well at my course and everything was great. But I never really kind of thought further than that until I finished studying. And then I kind of ended in this position that I think loads of people do, where you're right back at square one. You don't have any work experience. No one's going to hire you for anything. You don't have any money, so you can't do an internship or anything. And you feel completely stumped and lost. And yeah, I kind of was like totally in the wilderness for a lot of my 20s. And so I ended up just traveling like for 6 years, just working in factories, saving up, going away backpacking, coming back, doing the same. And, eventually that's how I met my wife. And I really enjoyed that period of my life. But so I think the point is, when I got the opportunity to do a master's, which is where the first education I did here in Denmark, like it's really, really different when you've been out and you've tried to work and you've tried to get places and failed. And when you get the opportunity to study again, whether, you've saved up for it or whatever, however you get there, like you come with a very different viewpoint. You know that this has to make money somehow, and that, that you have to take this seriously as a career. So seriously, to any students listening and anyone like in education and thinking, what are they going to do? Like, get busy, man. Just get so busy. This time you might feel stressed because of school. Of course, it is stressful. But this is your time to like fail, to go and try experiments, to volunteer, to kind of network and do stuff for free and help people out. Because, depending where you live in the world, of course, like perhaps you don't have the same financial responsibility that you're going to have when you get out. So, yeah, like definitely when I got back into doing a master's and then I did a postgraduate afterwards, it was just try everything, get your fingers in as many pies as possible. I did a lot of promotion because we didn't have much going on in the area. Loads of great techno we've got here in Aarhus, great house and techno scene, but nothing else. So yeah, I kind of got really busy starting platforms for other producers and inviting people from Germany and the UK over to play. And yeah, that kind of led to getting in a position where I was kind of trusted that I had a network and that I could kind of make things happen. So yeah, maybe I went on a ramble, but like really, when you ask what advice would I give, man, just get busy, do everything. The chances of being dead mouse is so tiny that you have to spread yourself a bit further out, and you might find that you find a job that you never thought of that you really, really enjoy, and it's way more stable than being a producer. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to there. Just really recommend kind of using your time in education to just spread yourself out and get as much experience as you can.
So to really get your hands involved in as many things as you can, and trust that kind of a path will start to emerge.
100%, and it'll probably be a surprising one. Like, it might not be exactly what you thought you'd do. Like 5 years ago, I didn't think I'd be a teacher. It didn't even really occur to me. But now I find like it helps me produce so much. It takes you back to basics,
I'm always catching myself saying things like, I think I've learned the most in this class as the teacher. When I do a course or when I'm working with students, sometimes I'm like, man, I just like learned a lot. And it might even be that I'm just reviewing things that I haven't thought about in a while. But that process, teaching is one way to really learn something. Um, I know in my like high school English teaching, I had never had a grasp on grammar so well until I had to teach it. Then it becomes, oh, I have to know what I'm talking about now. 'Cause some kid's gonna raise his hand and be like, "That's not true," and you don't want that
100%.
happening. So getting busy, I like that. I wrote that down. I like that you say get busy and that this is your time to fail. I think that's a really cool thing to tell people because when you're in school, failing is so bad. Like you can't fail. That's the worst thing you can do. And I think it does send like a weird message to students because so much of like figuring out what you're doing and how to get things right involves failing over and over again. And when many people I find get
Absolutely,
afraid
and
to
it's
fail because it's so stigmatized.
well, especially like in the world we're in now, this kind of mediated Instagram thing that we all in like are affected by somehow, but you cannot get anywhere without screwing up, like both in life and love and art and everything. Like it's so important to start somewhere, and all we ever see is success.
Yes.
Mediated to us. We never see our favorite producers like kicking the wall because they just can't get that track out, or because they haven't written something in 4 weeks and they're feeling really like anxious about it. And this happens to everyone. Like every pro that I've met, it doesn't have this perfect workflow or this perfect approach, or they haven't worked out the magic trick to making music. It's just hidden, and we just see like the success and the perfect, and that's how marketing works. But man, we really need to encourage people to screw up because then you redraw the map and you find something, you find a new solution to something you failed at, or and I think out of all my students, like the majority, what's in their way is this feeling of perfection and of making the right decision all the time, and not just finishing a track that's a bit weird and they'll probably never use. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Failing is a very important thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you make, that the students that tend to advance the most and grow the most are the ones that are okay with messing up and making garbage once in a while. And I think it like really does, like you said, it redraws the map for you and kind of recalibrates yourself. And if you're paying attention to what you're doing, you learn why you failed. And it's so true because we do see these like, overnight successes, we might think anyway, but you don't see the whole buildup. You don't see all the frustration. And I don't even remember who said it, but there was someone I heard the quote from that it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. Meaning that like it was like there's a lot you didn't see, there's a lot you missed. I didn't just show up here with this one hit or this one success. It was a big climb up that hill to get here.
100%. And I almost doubt that there are any overnight successes, no matter how much we're told it. Everyone's, these overnight successes often have a whole team of people making this overnight success happen. Yeah. Or, they've been killing it for 10 years under a different name and all of a sudden they've popped out of nowhere. But very, very rarely is that the case, that they're just, discovered and go straight to the top. The hard work is the one metric in this industry that I see being true all the time. You can have luck and talent and good looks and, a good sound, or you could be at the right place at the right time, but hard work is the only kind of one thing that everyone I see that's successful does. Like, that's the one thing that will get you to the top.
I couldn't agree more. And it's definitely the deciding factor in so many different things. Just that hard work, that discipline, that it's easy, especially I think in the arts, it's easy to say things like, oh, there's natural talent, or there's, some God-gifted ability. But a lot of times those talents are really just the subject of a lot of hard work put together over and over. And that's, you know, that's not the thing we're always, maybe especially this day and age where, you know, we're so used to instant gratification. I can order a package on Amazon and have it a day or two later, or, you know, instant everything. We're always in a lot of like, I guess, marketing on just about everything. It's always this like life hack or this like secret trick or some like, you know, video game cheat code that works in life that'll get you to where you're trying to go. But I mean, as we've learned, that's almost never the case. It's the hard work. It's much more reliable. And I think they say like fortune favors the prepared, or the you know, if there is luck, and often there is a little bit of luck, luck is no good if you're not ready and you're not prepared and you haven't done the hard work.
Absolutely. You just end up like a dog chasing a car. You know what you're going to do when you get it because you haven't thought that far in some ways, and that's fair enough because it's not the story that we're told. You know, it's just like you say. There's no kind of like hack to becoming a successful musician releasing music. There's not like a trick that all of a sudden you're going to learn it and your music's just going to sound the way you want it to. But then this doesn't sell, does it? You know, like it's not the answer that a lot of people want to hear. Like you just have to buckle down and keep going and keep like trucking on. But it's the truth. Although, of course, like you say, a bit of luck doesn't certainly helps out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. It might not be the popular marketing thing to be like, you know, the book is always like the 3 things you need to know to succeed quickly, or you know, the one thing that will get you further. The truth of the matter is, guess what? It's still hard work. You know, this might be a better road to follow, but it's still hard work. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. But I think the flip side to that as well, that I always try and tell my students is like, it's a positive thing because you're in control of that. Like you're not in control of if you were born gorgeous or rich or, you know, in the right city, and you're not in control if you happen to hang out with the right people or you have an uncle that knows a record executive. Like that's just, you know, you're not in control of that. That's not fair in a way. But like hard work, like that's something you can do, and it doesn't matter where you are or who you are or what position you are in this whole chain of things. Like you can take matters into your own hands by realizing that you can make luck happen and you can work your absolute butt off for something and obsess over it, and that's your power. Like you can choose to do that, and that kind of democratizes this in a way. Like of course some people have advantages in all things in life, but you know, you can also overcome that if you really go for it.
That's a really nice way to put it, and I think a great way to present it to students. That the hard work, that the fact that the main thing you need to do is the hard work is actually empowering, because now you have the responsibility. That's something you can control, as you say, and you know, there's that old like a serenity prayer that people say, like you know, I forget it, but you know, give me the power to change the things I can control and know the difference, or something like that, between the things I can't. But hard work, you know, is like you can decide to work hard. And the nice thing about it too is the more you get used to working hard, the easier it is to work hard. And it becomes like this muscle that you start flexing where you're used to the hard work. It's something I learned a lot through like exercise, and I do some martial arts training, and it's really taught me that if you just work hard, you know, hard work becomes more of like a regular for you. And then it's easier to work harder and push yourself further and further. But when you get used to things that are hard, everything else gets a little bit easier. And that to me has been really inspiring for a lot of things. And I you know, I want to get better at this still, but it's kind of made like things I don't want to do, things that I really don't feel like doing, a little more enjoyable, because I can see it as an exercise in working hard. Like, yeah, I don't want to cut the grass, let's say, you know, but I'm going to work hard at it and do my best, because I know that's practice at my work ethic. And then, you know, it's just becomes the normal way I do things after a while. And when I'm in those like phases, I can feel it, that like I put my best effort onto the things I do. And I know when I'm getting lazy that I'm just really practicing being lazy, and I'm getting better at being lazy. So it's like this funny thing. Like you got to keep working that hard work muscle.
Absolutely, absolutely, and especially like you say, the flip side of the laziness. Like, the more you practice that, the easier it is to do it because you're practicing it. And we're all totally guilty of that in some way, right? No one's kind of totally motivated 100% of the time. But like you say, it is just like we're creatures of habit at the end of the day. And anyone who's tried to give up smoking or something knows this very well.
Yeah.
And the more you practice something, the easier it gets, no matter what it is. And I think it's very true what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like you're constantly like creating a groove in a record or something. No matter what you're doing, you're always, creating that. We had a dog trainer come over when we first got our dog, and she was a puppy, and we knew nothing about training dogs. We didn't even know we were getting a puppy until we were in the pet store buying the puppy, which is not good. I've later learned you should always go to shelters, but I didn't know that at the time. But the lesson the trainer said was like, and she made it a funny point. She's like, how often are you trying to train your dog? And we're like, well, we do like 20 minutes here. And like, we get home from work. We try for like a half hour. We do. And she's like, no, you don't. Like, no, like we do. We honestly, she's like, no. And she's like telling us like we're lying to her. But she's like, you're always training your dog. Even when you think you're not, you're always training your dog. Every single thing you do, you're teaching your dog. And it was just like this. Suddenly the universe lined up in my head, and I'm like, whoa, like that moment, like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, like, whoa, moment where you're like, oh my God, like that's true about everything. Like you're always building habits, you're always building patterns. And it's that moment affected me a lot, in that it helped me realize like every time I do anything, I'm basically deciding to go in that direction with my life. If I decide not to exercise and not to work on music and sit on the couch and watch TV, I have to remind myself that although that's okay to do once in a while, this is a direction I'm now going in. Currently, my trajectory is to be a person that sits on the couch and watches Netflix all the time. Whereas if I'm doing my hard work and, the things I'm trying to accomplish, like, well, that's my trajectory now that I'm working on that stuff. And you do have control. I like that. That's something I will definitely tell my students more of. That's a good thing, because that's something you can control. You can be responsible for that. How hard you work.
No, I think I was just agreeing with what you said. About the more you do one thing, the more you're kind of affecting all of your life and taking it that direction. If you finish your washing and you finish your dishes, you're probably more likely to finish your track at the same time, because you're just getting into habits of that.
Yeah, that's funny. And, things like Netflix or social media, they are getting really good at taking your attention away. And that's their job, honestly, is to like kind of steal you from the things you're supposed to be doing. Netflix is great because your one episode ends and it starts counting down, 20 seconds, I'm starting the new one. And all you have to do to let the new one start is nothing. It will just go for you. And I think, there's a lot of stuff coming out about like, addiction to our phones and social media. And some of the big developers too even say like, that's what we were doing. When I was working at one of the co-founders of Facebook came out saying like, we were trying to get you addicted to Facebook, we were trying to get you to spend a few more minutes a day here, a few more minutes, there. So it's easy to get caught up in.
And they're way better at understanding us than we are at understanding us. And that's kind of the scary part. But yeah, I've heard that he feels very bad about this guy that invented this algorithm now, and now he's wondering if maybe that wasn't the best idea, and if they knew what was going to happen or not. But yeah, it's the world we live in. It's the stuff we got to deal with. Annoyingly, I grew up in the 90s, so this is all sci-fi to me in a way.
Yeah, me too. This is just crazy. And I'm so thankful that I do have that frame of reference. Now I'm 37 now, And I went through high school when nobody had a cell phone. And then just after that, everyone started getting them. And, I think I was in like ninth grade the first time I ever went on AOL. And, we were IMing people. And that was the first taste. So I do remember what it was like before that, a little bit anyway. But, people today that are growing up don't. And, I'm going to start sounding like the old man yelling at the kids to get off his lawn. But you got to wonder a little bit like, where's this going? Is this necessarily all good?
100%. And if you've seen it change so quickly, like, I'm 34, so we're a similar generation.
Yeah.
And it is exciting to be alive at this time, but, it's, because we can perceive the difference in then and now, I guess it makes you think how fast is it accelerating and how much more is it going to change? Like a really funny thing, me and my wife were given a PlayStation 3 by a good friend of ours, who was like, "Hey, dude, you need to like learn to do some R&R. Have my old PlayStation and just like learn to chill and play games." And typically we've got this massive stack of games, and all we want to do is play Crash Bandicoot and Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff from when we were kids.
Right.
And so we loaded up Crash Bandicoot, and for old time's sake, and like the time it took to load up was just unbelievable. There's no way anybody would tolerate that today. Like it was minutes, for it to load, and then everything was 8-bit and still like super cool, I think. But yeah, it just kind of struck me how our patience level has completely dropped in the last 15 years. And I remember being totally cool with that and just not even feeling like I had to look at something else. So just be there. But now, I'd get my phone out, or, I'd be like, what the hell is this? Has it crashed? What's wrong? And it just made me think, if that's 15 years, like what's going to happen in the next 15 years? Exciting as it is at the same time. It's, But yeah, like you say, we are definitely getting into old man, get off my lawn mode. And maybe it's the fate that bestowed upon us.
And it is kind of ironic that we're doing this, we're talking over Skype, which is this, obviously a product of this new technology. And, all the work we do is on computer as far as music production goes. So there's, kind of, I don't know if we're hypocrites or there's some irony in there.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I want to ask you a question about, so you said you went to school for drama.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed about your videos, and actually, when I was doing some of my videos for Warp Academy, Drew from Warp sent over part of your video as like a little example with the, you kind of have like yourself FaceTime on the screen talking like, hey, this is what this tutorial is going to be about. And he sent me part of your video because it was a good example of what to strive for. And something I noticed about what you do is just you have this very nice like level of expressivity, excitement, without being like too overboard, which sometimes happens. And then you told me that you studied drama. So I guess my question for you, and you can take this, in any direction you want, but how does that help you? Because I know last night you did a big presentation for Ableton Live 10. And how does your drama experience play into, say, like your teaching or your music production work?
Oh, massively. And the funny thing is, like, when I went to drama school, I never had any aspiration to be an actor, and I'm terrible at lines. And when I've tried to act in the past, I'm just hopeless. It's so obvious that I'm not that person I'm trying to pretend to be. And I didn't study a very acting based course. It was very kind of dancey and physical theatre. But I spent ages thinking, like, why did I do that? Why did I sink 3 years of my life into this kind of very unemployable degree that isn't really isn't really going to get you a job unless someone also has been to drama school and they kind of see that. But wow, like it was really, really a great thing to do. And everything from just kind of like improvising and, in the case of doing videos with Warp Academy, kind of, remembering the script a bit and being able to kind of pace the way you speak and kind of emphasize things. Because, you spend ages talking, speaking Shakespeare's language and, learning about how that text is constructed and why and how it's inspiring certain emotions and how you can get certain tones from text. And yeah, I found that it actually really leaked over into teaching music because, you can take a really, really amazing concept, and if you can't communicate it, it's kind of useless to your student. But if you can communicate something very well that's simple, on the other extreme, then they're still going to get something great out of it because they're going to understand it. So yeah, when I do videos with Warp, it all kind of feels natural. I write my scripts and I do it in front of a camera and that's that, and edit it afterwards. But I think, yeah, all of this kind of like being a pretty bad actor and an average drama student kind of, yeah, just really fed into this and kind of really gave me, in a way, a bit of an advantage over other people in my position, which helped get certified with Ableton and opened up a lot of doors because, I guess back to the whole building career conversation we were having a minute ago, like, it's so cheesy and it's such a cliche, and I can't believe I'm even going to say this, but people really do buy into people. Like, if you are friendly and courteous and clear and open and, and you have control of your body language, well, it just opens so many doors because, even people that you think are so unobtainable in whatever job they do, at the end of the day, they're just a human being and they want to have a laugh and, and they want to drink a beer with someone who's fun or at least they can talk to. And if you can be that person, if you can, if you know how to, come across, honestly, and you don't have to be super, I'm quite an energized dude when I talk, but that's not really necessary. It's not about that. But I think, being kind of open and honest and humble and having your feet on the ground, that opens all the doors for you because people are just people and everyone can spot arrogance or false pretension a mile off. And, you can, I can, the listener listening to this can. And a lot of the time, and I've been guilty of this in the past, when you're feeling a bit insecure about your situation, if you're in a room full of pros and you've got this imposter syndrome vibe going on, it's very easy to accidentally come across a little bit arrogant because you're like overdoing the holes that you feel you have. And yeah, back to your question, I guess like studying theatre allows you to pretend to be a lot of different people, and kind of through that you can discover what, how you come across by working with other actors and directors. And like a good actor is, you think of Robert De Niro or you think of some real classics, and they kind of just play themselves. Like Samuel L. Jackson, great actor of course, but he's kind of Samuel L. Jackson in every film. And we like that. We buy into that character. Perhaps he is that character, perhaps not. But yeah, I definitely learned that learning to act is kind of just like learning to be a social human being, and all these plays and all this stuff is just kind of putting you in different contexts, and you find how you react. And so yeah, for the drama students out there that are like, what have I done? I want to be a producer. Like, no, you've made a good decision. Just remember that it's not going to make you rich. It's just going to be the bed that the rest of your skills are built upon. And will ultimately really help out once you've mastered some kind of craft. It will separate you from other people who perhaps don't feel so comfortable talking in front of an audience or, explaining things in an interview or that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and you're tapping into something that I really do like to talk about on the podcast is that the way different skills connect to different fields. And how your drama background will help in, I think you may have mentioned almost like a job interview situation where you know how to present yourself as maybe like a warm, caring person. I think all that stuff is so important to realize, how these different skills, and that's I think how we get interesting people, say even in the music production field, because they're bringing something of their own to it, their own background. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of figure out in yourself. What are the special things that you have that you bring to the table that makes you unique and worth paying attention to, or interesting, or the way you think, or however it might be. But to really embrace that individuality, I guess, that you have as a person, whether it be your background, your experience, or just your whatever you have there. So that's pretty cool to hear.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've found too, myself, just teaching in high school, especially where people don't necessarily want to be there. They have to be in that classroom. It's a lot different than, say, when I teach some music production stuff, or I'm doing one of the courses I teach. They're excited. They're paying to be there, whereas a lot of my students in high school would pay not to be there. So it does become a bit of a performance, and you start to realize what you need to do in order to engage them and make it interesting for them. And I really do think a lot of that stuff translates in a lot of other areas. And I'm very interested in the way it seems like to me, almost, the more I learn about one thing, the more I realize it applies to everything else that I do.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it is all holistic, and especially when you're working with people, like one skill so easily translates to another, and this whatever it is that kind of got you your job through an interview, that skill is also going to influence the kids that you teach, and the relationship you have with the kiosk guy at the end of the road, or all these things, they bleed into each other, and I think it's a real. Just like you said, everyone has different experiences and different backgrounds and everything, and I think it's so important to key into that and to know that is your own personal story and that has value, no matter kind of what it is. But so long as you can tell that story in a good way, in an interesting way, and not tell it at people, but speak to them, or converse with them. And I'm sure you get it as well as a teacher that. Young musicians or young students, they're a lot older than when I was their age, in a way. And they're kind of, from a YouTube generation, not really down with being lectured so much, and not really down with being, a top-down hierarchy of power in the classroom. And in my experience, respond way better if you treat them like adults, even if, legally they're not. Because, my favourite teachers at school were the ones that, were just kind of straight to the bone and had boundaries and kind of got us involved in a two-way street rather than just kind of typing things on a blackboard and making us write it down. It's I think younger people see straight through that these days, and I think they read that you don't really know what you're doing if you have to kind of dictate every single thing, and they just have to copy it. I think they don't buy that anymore. I think they buy people that stimulate them and that they can kind of disagree with, and and that will respect that. And even though ultimately teacher might be right, but that's kind of useless if the students aren't learning that that's the case. And it's a lot better to let people find things out for themselves and just kind of open the doors, and it sounds just so cheesy, but open the door and let them step through by themselves, because the knowledge you gain on purpose is way more valuable than the knowledge that you're just fed. And ultimately, when you need it, you won't remember all that stuff from the blackboard, but the experiences you have, then they stay with you forever. So yeah, I definitely get what you're talking about, and this dynamic in teaching and working with people.
I think that's a great point to sort of open the door to let them have the experience rather than tell them what the experience is. I mean, I'm sure many people can relate to, watching, say, hours and hours of YouTube tutorials online about a certain topic or whatever it might be. So let's say synthesis, just for argument's sake. You can watch a million tutorials, but you don't really know it until you start doing it, until you start getting your hands on it. And I think that idea of opening the doors for people to get those experiences is a really good way to go about it. And the idea of speaking to people like they are adults is super important. It's probably one of the biggest reasons I got into teaching, because I always appreciated the adults in my life that would actually talk to me and actually listen to me and actually value what I had to say as being valid and not just coming from a kid, and not just be a chance for them to teach something to me or shove it down my throat. It was nice to be heard. and nice to be valued. And that, I think, is really an important thing in life, because I think we all know people that you feel like you're having a conversation with, but they're just waiting to say the next thing, to make their next point or whatever it might be.
Totally.
To be heard. Yeah, that's pretty cool, and to give them the opportunities. Give them like the active role instead of just sit back and absorb.
Absolutely. And I mean, this ties into what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation about how we learn so much from teaching, because, if you do treat these students like, the young adults that they are, and you give them time and you actually genuinely listen to what they have to say, even if it takes your lesson plan a bit, off track, the way people ask things or the perspective that students come from can be totally, totally different from your own. And it can really shake up your own workflow as an artist, even if, what this student's saying isn't technically correct or isn't, is they've maybe got the wrong end of the stick of something. But the place that they come from, it's something that is very inspiring. And, as teachers and Ableton certified trainers, a lot of what we spend a lot of time focusing on is best practices and the correct way to do things. And of course, that's really important. That's, that's what separates a qualified teacher from an unqualified teacher, someone who, knows the correct and measured, tested way of doing something. But in focusing way too much on this, I think we're kind of opening ourselves up to live in our own echo chamber of best practices. And, it's kind of, I'm opening a bottle of wine just because I had this conversation a little while ago with my wife and some friends. These corkscrews, they have this little knife on the end, and that's there so you can like take the foil off the wine. And for some reason I never do that. I just like get a fork or something and make an absolute pig's ear of ruin the whole thing. And we had this argument, this discussion of like, that's not the right way to do it. And me saying, yeah, but I still managed to get the cork out of the wine, and we're drinking wine. And it was all a laugh, and kind of also like a Danish English clash maybe. But it reminds me of kind of, students, like maybe their way isn't the most efficient, or, they're missing, there's a big hole in the technical knowledge behind what they're doing. However, like it gets the job done for them, and we might learn, why did they go that way? Like what's in it for them to take this course that isn't the best way to get that result that they're after. And in discovering that, like you can find like some very interesting workflows and very interesting ways of making music, and key into what's kind of going behind your student's head. And that's so important to actually getting them to progress, to understand where they're coming from. And if we just bark orders at them and say, this is how you make a beat, this is how you compress vocals, this is how you master a track, they can get this off YouTube. They don't need us to tell us this. They need sparring, they need mentoring, and they need a conversation. But you can go on YouTube and, you can look at Mr. Bill or Sadwick or Tom Cosm or, so many resources, Warp Academy, of course. And you can get all this information. Our job's totally changed as a result of the internet. And I think it's very important to listen to why people aren't doing things the inverted commas correct way.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, I noticed that, you kind of like carve out your path, you figure out how you're going to do things. And especially once you start kind of mastering a tool, you have like this way, well, this is how I do it, and this is the most efficient way. But in what we do in making music and creating art or whatever it is, so much of the fun and the magic happens when the unexpected goes on, or when you explore new territory. And I've had the experience many times watching students do something a certain way with their music, and then I say, oh, that's a cool way to do it. And when I try it myself, I come up with different types of things. And sometimes, although it might be a little more roundabout or less efficient or take more time, whatever, I wind up with something different and going in new directions. And I think that's, for me, where I get a lot of my learning as a teacher, by understanding, like you said, why they're doing what they're doing, and then seeing how it works for yourself and applying that. And very often it leads in interesting new places.
100%. And these interesting new places, the more and more you do this, they become rarer and rarer, you know, especially if you're just coming from your own head. So it's so valuable. And just like you said, you know, who learned more in this lesson, really? You know, I taught you something you can go and find on the internet, but you gave me insight into my own practice and made me realize that maybe I'm being a bit square and I'm being a bit too neat and tidy about things.
I think things get boring in that way when it becomes too much of a formula, too much of the same thing over and over. And I hear it in my music where things start just sounding the same. I'm using the same chords. I'm using the same pattern. I start with the drums. Then I whatever it might be. And when you throw that on its head, sometimes it can just change everything. That's tends to be when that passionate fire gets lit inside of myself, is when it's like something new and fresh, and it's a bit of an exploration. And that's, I guess, a little self-understanding I've come across, is that one of the things I love about doing music is like the exploring part, the kind of discovering things. Different people get different feelings. Maybe they just like what it feels like to sing or play an instrument. And I love that stuff too, but I really do get a kick out of like discovery and seeing where things take me. So I love seeing people come up with like different ways to do things and just trying it out and seeing what happens.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's just like one little thing. And yeah, like you say, it gives you this whole kind of feeling of, wow, I've never unturned this stone. Like, what's under here? And and yeah, you get right back to, that wonderful time that we all remember as beginning to produce, where like you didn't have a clue what you were doing, and so you made way more interesting stuff than you do now, because everything was discovery, and you were totally misusing things, and you were just trying to get an idea out in your head, and you had no idea how to go about that. And so I look at my old projects, and they sound terrible, but the way they were made is, I was like, wow, what the hell was I thinking there? That's kind of cool, and that's kind of punk. That punk aesthetic, especially in electronic music where you have complete control. Every time you press space or play, it will play back exactly the same way, like perfectly every time. That's impossible in any other form of music. Orchestras, like bands, no matter how good you are at an instrument, you cannot possibly just play exactly the same thing, as if you record them 2 takes and they phase each other out when you flip them. It's not possible. And yet with a computer, this is not only possible, it's the norm. It's everything. And this, convenient as it is and necessary as it may be, really removes that element of surprise and that feedback that you can get with your own work. Whereas when you don't have a clue what you're doing, like, you get that feedback because, you press one button and everything changes and you're like, oh no, what happened? And now your beat sounds like it's underwater, and, you don't get that, you turned a phaser on because you don't know what a phaser is or what the on button does. I really think it's important to cherish. And I guess this moves us also into Live 10, this idea of new things coming out, and all of a sudden having your workspace changed and your environment that you create in kind of expands somehow. And you're all of a sudden not an old hat. You've got some learning to do. And that's, I'm sure you agree, like a really thrilling place to be, and that we're experiencing at the moment, I guess.
Sure, totally. I love one thing you just said, where you said, you try a few things and then all of a sudden it sounds like it's underwater. I really like that frame of thinking, because as I get more and more, technical, and I'm learning how to do this and that, I can listen to the music sometimes and be like, oh, that's a low pass filter, and they put some reverb on it, so it sounds kind of underwater. Whereas, maybe in the past I just had that underwater feeling. So I like to really think about like this idea of like what I want it to feel like. Like, I want this track to feel like it's underwater. This part is like, maybe floating in the sky. And then to start to work with the feeling or the intention, and then figure out how to get there, I think is a nice fresh way for me, to not get so technical all the time. We're like, I'm going to use the low pass filter at 1K. And, it's all stuffy science stuff and not so much like this emotional feeling that you're getting. Because I think sometimes when I'm working within the computer and I'm looking at my tracks, this like crazy sound is now just an audio clip. And it's not this like, spaceship zooming by in my headphones. So I like to sometimes like not look at the screen and just like kind of let it, all right, what is the feeling? How can I make this sound like it's happening in a frantic environment or something? And I think that's a fun way to conceptualize sound as like, where is it taking me?
Absolutely. And I was actually talking to my good friend Martin about this yesterday. We lose so easily this kind of emotional map. And we all talk about music being about telling stories. And I believe that's the case. And that's kind of what you're getting at, that, like in our head, we have this sequence of like impressions or feelings or events that we want to communicate that inspire us. And we might not be completely aware of it. But that's kind of it, that's why, you have an A section and a B section. The story changes at some point. It goes somewhere else. And we get so technical and so formulaic about, 16 bar loops and you need a sub and a bass and blah, 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 blah. And we were kind of talking about how nice it would be. He recently did my friend is in a band, and they're like a math metal band. And he did a project with a Danish poet who's quite elderly and has been around for a while. And it was a really random collaboration, but all of a sudden, where they're usually thinking of kind of polyrhythms and riffs, and that's how they base their songwriting.
Right.
All of a sudden, they were having to like look at verses and kind of very descriptive language, and how do we get from this paragraph to this paragraph musically? How do we talk about the snow melting, and how do we talk about the sun coming up, and these kind of like slightly more abstract things. And he was just saying how like incredibly fast they were writing, because all of a sudden they had this common language that wasn't actually about music in a sense. It was beyond that. It was about creativity and telling a story. And his mind was blown at how quickly and efficiently they started working, just by kind of taking it to a more emotional place, and kind of more going through different feelings that they want to capture somehow, and not really caring how or what tools they were going to use, but just knowing that, like you said, this bit's underwater. Like, how are we going to do that? Well, we'll work that out when we get there, but like that's where we're going, and that's what we've decided to do. Yeah, I think it's, and it really kind of made me think, like, there's a reason all the greats sit there writing notes, because this is it. You need a plan of some sort, and that can't be a plan of 16 bars and a technical description of what's going to happen. It has to be an emotive one, if indeed you want people to feel emotions when they listen to your work.
Yeah, so true. And not to just say that being underwater is the only kind of feeling there is, but it makes me think about something that, one of my main inspirations in music, and especially in recording, is the Beatles. All the experiments they did with the recordings it's so fun and it's interesting. And speaking of underwater, they have the song Octopus's Garden. And it's a song about being, I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden. And they had that same thought at one point, like, how can we make this like fit underwater? So when they have that kind of weird solo part, and it's not even like it's just, I guess, like an instrumental, but what they did is they took cups of water with straws and started blowing bubbles into the microphone, and you hear all these like little bubbles underwater, like you're underwater. And I just remember like the first time I noticed that, it just like blew my mind, and it suddenly like, it was like I went into like an inspirational spaceship, and I was like, there's so many ways you can create these feelings, like blowing bubbles on a song, like that's not an instrument, you don't always think like, when you go and record, like you think instruments, you think sounds, you think melodies, but the idea that like blowing bubbles in a glass of water does so much for the feeling of the song. I just find that like incredibly inspiring, and it's a really cool way to like bring life to your music by doing kind of weird things like that to create the mood and to create the atmosphere and the environment.
Absolutely, and I know exactly what you mean. That particular solo where it just kind of the whole piece of this picture kind of gets clear, and it's such a simple thing. And you know, going back to what we were saying about students, the funny thing about the Beatles was that they were just making this up as they went along. Like there was no rule book. All these recording techniques, right. You know, Harrison's backwards guitars, you know, the Indian influence, the double tracking, the hard panning, like. You know, I can't remember his name, the fifth Beatle, the producer, but...
George Martin, yeah.
That was it, yeah. They were just making this stuff up. There was no kind of like best practice of adding emotion to your production. And there was no like, this is how you create space in a mix, you know, a PDF guide into your email here. There was none of that. They were just like literally using their imaginations, which of course they had in abundance between them. But it just fascinates me how they just kind of went straight for the jugular. And, you know, how do we make water? Let's go and get some straws from the cafe around the corner and we'll just blow into our water or our tea or whatever it is. And I was like, yeah, high fives all round. Let's do that. Okay, next. And, and you know, now, we'd go, okay, free sound. Or, you know, I'm going to go and make a field recording. And how do I process this? And, you know, what do other people do with water? And let's go and look on YouTube. They were just like, you know, they were the ones that had the decision. Like no one else was really, as far as I can tell, seriously influencing them. And there's a lot to be said for just doing it your way.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the math rock band with the poet, it makes me think about just how weird making music is, because it is so emotional and it creates such feelings, and you know, you can listen to music and feel like you're in some world. And it's very emotional, but as we start learning how to do it, we learn the technical stuff behind it. And it's very easy to get caught up in the technical stuff, and then you start thinking of everything almost mathematically or formulaic. And to connect it to the Beatles, George Martin was a very traditional engineer and a lot of experience doing much more traditional music, classical music even, scoring. He had the understanding of the theory and the technical stuff. And the Beatles had a lot of the imagination there too. And it was a nice marriage of like somebody, and it's almost like we have these people in our heads in a way, where some part of it is really technical and some parts really emotional, and they had that in the different people to kind of get that all together and work it out. And I've read a lot, you know, about the Beatles in the studio and stuff, and one of the things they always talked about was they would ask George Martin, like, all right, how are we supposed to do this? He would tell them, like, technically how they're supposed to do it, and they'd be like, all right, how can we mess around with it now? And I think that's like, in a way, we can think in our heads like we have all of those attitudes and approaches in our brains, and should just not forget to tap into each one and explore them all.
100%. It really reminds me of a lesson that I was taught by a teacher I used to have, Henrik Munk, amazing teacher and engineer and musician. And I, you know, at the time I was really struggling finishing things and just going round in circles. You know, we've all been there for years and years, of course. And he talked about exactly what we're talking, and about having hats. About explaining that, like, the human brain can, you know, it has different modes or different states, and there's a very rare person that can inhibit two or more simultaneously. And you know, I don't know if this left side, right side brain stuff is even scientific, or if it's just, you know, popular myth. But he describes, you know, making music as being different jobs and having different hats. You know, the technician hat, the engineer, the mixer, the one that's thinking about decay times and frequency ranges and side chaining and, you know, space and depth and things. And the artist hat, the person that wants to make things and sculpt things and take something and turn it into something else, or present an idea or whatever. And I don't do this anymore, of course, but at the time he made me actually physically get two hats and put them on each of my speakers in my home studio. And this was, about 3 or 4 years ago now. And for a short amount of time, I did this. When I was producing, I would wear one of the hats, and they were different colours, and, you know, I knew which one I had on. And it sounds ridiculous. Honestly, it sounds absurd. But if you're struggling finishing things and listening to this podcast, like, give this a shot, because all it did was remind me that, you got to commit to the job you're doing and like fully go into that. And that we can really exhaust ourselves bouncing between these two states. And, Hemingway, famously talked about writing when he was drunk and editing when he was sober, and I guess that's a whole other conversation. But the fact is that he's split up these ideas that like a lot of very prolific artists are actually pretty strict in how, like, when they do particular things, and that we can call workflow in a way, knowing what order you need to do things in, and that's personal, of course, but like this idea of giving each part of yourself the time to do that job to the best you can, and not bounce between like mixing your drums and composing your drums, or mixing your drums and choosing the drum samples, to kind of approach it freshly each time. And man, it just gets so much quicker. If all you're doing is mixing and you've given yourself an hour to do it and you've got your engineer hat on, you'll get a much better mix than if you're kind of bouncing between a bit of composition, a bit of sound design, a bit of mixing, a bit of Facebook, a bit of, it's really important. So I really resonate with what you're saying, about the fifth Beatle, as they call them. There are many parts to this, and in a way, you have to kind of engage with them separately in order to kind of mix them together at some point.
I think the hat idea is awesome. I love it, because what you're saying, the technician, the engineer, like in the old days, that would have been a job for a different person. And we're doing the job of many people at once when we're doing our music. And a lot of the kind of mind spaces you have to be in each one of those different positions is contradictory to the mind space you need to be in another position that we're wearing a hat for. So to like really like put yourself in the mode of like, all right, I'm creating now, all right, I'm mixing now, all right, I'm mastering now, is I think really smart and efficient. And this has been proven in industry with the assembly line, where it's much more efficient for a worker to only be, say, like assembling the muffler of the car or whatever, and it's this next person is working the body, this next person is putting the tires on, instead of like one person doing every job. It's considerably faster to have one person just focusing on one thing constantly, and it just moves to the next step with another person. And
absolutely,
how often are we like still like coming up with the idea of our song, and we're thinking about like throwing a mastering plug-in on the on the master channel, and it's like you are polishing the car before it's even been assembled.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it, 100%. But we've all been there. We're all guilty of that in some way.
And it's so easy to slip between the two. It's a matter of just a quick thought that flashes on your mind, and now all of a sudden you're compressing the snare drum before you've even written the beat. And having the hat on, I think, could actually be a nice reminder, and also even just a little like sort of like meditative exercise in that you're recognizing that, oh, my brain is switching gears, so I'm grabbing the hat, and then you become more familiar with when that is happening, and you start to recognize every time you decide to switch roles, and hopefully you can kind of let it go. Maybe have a notebook or something, make a note. Yeah, I need to work on that snare drum, compress it later, but I'm not there now. I'm making the beat still.
Absolutely, and exactly.
I like the hat idea. I don't think it's silly at all.
I definitely recommend it. I mean, I only did it for like a little while, and I think, like you said, it's a learning exercise to kind of like get yourself into that pattern of being aware of what you're doing and why. But you're absolutely right that, like I've done it, all my students have done it, reach for that limiter, because, it has to sound good. And you know what? It really doesn't. It's not supposed to sound good. Like that's what comes later. That's when you refine your idea. But we kind of want to straight out of the box sound huge and compressed and massively loud. And, you get these sample packs that they sell so well because straight out the box they just sound enormous. And it's gratifying and instantly gratifying. But that isn't really how it's built up. If you want to do this kind of, and be honest to yourself. I believe, although maybe that's not entirely true, but it's not supposed to sound good off the bat. You know, when I sit down with a guitar and I try and write a song or something, it sounds like a mess until it's finished, and that's the whole point. That's what creating is, right? And we forget this so easy. We just want things to sound pro, and we need that motivation to keep through. You know, I've noticed that when I stick a limiter on and boost everything up, it's because maybe sometimes I need a bit of more self-belief in my idea, and limiting it to the extremes is like the easiest way to do that quickly. But there's a time and a place for that, and I think if you allow yourself to be terrible in some circumstances, especially in the building process, then you're going to get a lot further, because you can just accept that you can make it good. But right now you're working on the composition, the story, and that isn't going to be loud and fancy and explosive. It's going to be kind of boring maybe, but that's it's steps in the progress of towards your goal.
I agree, and I like the example you bring up of the sample packs sounding, amazingly produced, and they're already probably mastered and everything. And it makes me think too of like, if you get like a synthesizer, whether it's virtual or real, a lot of times the presets have like every effect, and you press one key and it's almost a whole song that happens, immediately. But rarely does that stuff fit into a song I'm working on, because it's almost like too much. That thing is too far off in like finished world, whereas my music is still in the infant stages. And I think sometimes we can do that to ourselves, like where we have something that's a little too developed for its own good, a little too much going on for its own good, where it's not ready for that part in the project.
100%. And then you just end up going around in circles, right? Because it doesn't quite fit in, because it's so individual and huge by itself. And so you think, oh, okay, this means my kick is wrong. So you start changing your kick, and then you go around and around again. And I don't want to talk in any way bad about the synth Serum. It's just the first thing that comes to mind. But don't get me wrong, it's an incredible piece of software, and an incredibly coded synth. But it comes to mind because a lot of the sounds that come with the preset packs and other presets that I've heard are just very, very big and impressive, and you kind of have to write a whole song around that in a way. And that's really good if you're trying to make, that style of music. And obviously it's a very flexible piece of software, and it doesn't have to be like that at all. Presets are just that. They're supposed to be like gateways to what something can do and what you could make if you wanted. But I see a lot of people using, like synths like Serum or Massive, and getting like very, very, impressive sample packs, preset packs, trying to drop them in, and then just kind of like they end up deconstructing every other element of their song and get really frustrated, because they're like, but it sounded good, so and this sounds good, and it's the same genre and it's the same vibe, but there's more to it than that. There's a lot to be said for frequency, content, and balance. And yeah, it's a myth that we buy ourselves, because like you said at the beginning, we're used to being instantly successful, instantly gratified in everything we do, and that's what sells in many cases. But to clarify, not dissing on Serum or any of Steve Duda's work. Guy's an absolute legend and amazing at what he's doing. But yeah, it's just the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, and I don't take it that way at all. The work is obviously incredible. But I can kind of relate to that from that perspective, doing my sample packs, my Ableton Live packs. I do have this sort of like these dueling characters in my head where, if I'm trying to sell it especially, I want it to sound impressive. I want people to open it up and be like, whoa, this sound is great, and just show you like, look what you can do with the thing I made. But I also want it to be useful, like more than anything. I want it to be something you can actually use. So I do spend a lot of time myself just sort of testing it and using it in music to see how it works. And a lot of times I find myself keeping things a little more plain than they could be. I find myself saying that, yeah, I could make this sound like a crazy whole song with one key, but that I can't make music with that unless that's the song, the one key. So it's kind of like a a part of my practice is, I make the sounds, but I have to like find them useful and fitting into things, because I definitely know that feeling where you are in the music store, saying you're trying something out, and you're like, listen to these sounds, they're great, and then you get home and you put them in your track, and you're like, what am I even going to do with this? It's not real sound for me to actually make anything with.
Absolutely.
So
and they got
a
us
weird struggle.
Yeah, it's kind of cyclic, and they've got us because musicians love sounds. That's kind of like the one thing that we can all agree on, and we like massive, gratifying, interesting sounds, and that's so that we become actually very easy to market to in that sense, because we're very easily distracted and pleased by these things, and yeah, it feels like wow, if this can make this sound, imagine what it can do in my own ideas. And that's a very innocent and sweet thought, but unfortunately that's the plan. That's why this is happening, and that's why you're going to hand that money over in the music store, because this is the kind of attention span we have. But then of course there is room for crazily huge over-processed presets and things if they're used with some kind of grace. But it's great that what you say about making your own packs and your own output usable as opposed to impressive, because then it will actually get used, and people will find it's the missing piece in their arrangement or whatever. Whereas it kind of plays the long game in a sense, rather than just going for that instant hit and then, oh, why did I buy that? I'm never going to use that now.
Yeah, I guess I switched the hat, and I then try to actually make music with the sounds I've made. And there have been times where I'm kind of like, like something's wrong. Like I'm just not getting there. And a lot of times it's because I need to turn all the effects down that I've spent all this time programming in. You build your racks and everything, and you're excited, so of course you want it to be there. But then you realize, like, all right, that's to taste. You got to use that to taste on the actual project you're working on. But the preset will sound maybe better if I do crank everything up. So maybe speaking of new toys, you did mention it before, and I wanted to get back to it. We are in an exciting time as Ableton certified trainers with Live 10. Just around the corner, and just last week, the beta went public, so now it's in the hands of anyone that wants to use it. So how are you feeling about it? What are your thoughts? Are you excited? Or
Oh man, right now it's just like a non-stop Christmas for us, isn't it? It's just killer, and it's of course I'm gonna say it predictably, but I genuinely mean it. Like the improvements are just mind-blowing. So smart on Ableton's part. It could have gone many other different ways. They could have tried to imitate the competition a bit more. Kind of go for the bitwig kind of thing, and hook onto that modular kind of thing. And I think I was concerned there was going to be some whole direction change in response to how much the industry's changed since Live 9 came out. But whoa, it's just killer. It's subtle. It's very gentlemanly in many ways. I think like the changes they've made, and I think it's really aimed at the users. It's not aimed to hook anyone else in necessarily, but a lot of the improvements to arrangement view, the way that we can interact with automation differently, the way we can move audio around within a clip so easily. It's like I feel like a lot of the improvements are specifically designed to prevent repetitive strain injury. I think they've almost taken a kind of like healthy living aspect to live, and of course the devices that have come with it are super inspiring and dirty and colourful and characteristic. And I think if there's one thing I've heard a lot of students talk about with a lot of live native devices is that they wished for some kind of, it was too utilitarian, and that's why they were going to Silent or kind of other plugins and Ozone. They were needing something that had some kind of character, and boom, we've got a lot of new devices that really are built around that idea. So yeah, for me, I'm just loving it and making music, finding new toys and new ways of doing things, and feeling kind of like a beginner again at something. So and that's just golden, I think. And how about you? I mean, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think, in a lot of ways, it was almost kind of bold on Ableton's part because, like you said, like they could have done something that would have, said like gotten the new people interested or, some kind of crazy thing. And I think they did pretty well. I think Wavetable, for instance, is very striking. And that's kind of like one of these like, big like features that are in there. But I think a lot of the gold is in the subtle things that you said that just improve workflow. And it's kind of funny for me as I use Live 10, and I pretty much use it for everything except when I'm making my sound packs for people that might not have Live 10 yet. So I'm still using 9 for that. But otherwise, like I'm in 10 all the time. And a lot of the things that are new, when I go back to Live 9, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, man, I forgot that's a new feature. Because they're so natural. It's a very like natural progression, and a lot of it just sort of makes sense. And as soon as you understand it or you see what it's going on, you just get the idea. So like you said, just the way you interact with clips in the arrangement view and the way automation is now is just super nice. Little thing like just having the little fades on the corner of the clips, which is something Pro Tools had in like 2006 when I started using it, and probably before then. But that is a real time saver, and it just is a big help. And in Live 9, I have to right click to get to my fades. It's like, what? But a lot of little things like that. But yeah, the character thing is huge for me because I'm always trying to destroy the perfection of my digital recordings by introducing character somehow, whether it's sometimes it's as extreme as recording it onto a cassette tape and bringing it back in. Other times it's just adding different distortions and stuff. But some of the new devices like Drum Bus and especially Echo just adds so much depth and character and feeling to the music. They're inspiring on their own. Probably the thing that has changed what I do the most is probably capture, which is the feature where you can be playing something on a MIDI device, and if you liked what you did and forgot to press record, you can just go back and capture it, and Live figures it out, what you did. My favorite part of it is that it also figures out the tempo for your session. So now I can sit down and say, like, play something on the keys or play the drums or whatever, and then when I capture it, Live tells me what the tempo is. It makes the loop pretty much perfectly, at least 9 out of 10 times. And I don't have to then, like, think about, like, all right, what's the BPM? Let me set the metronome. Let me do the timing. And I can just play. And I can also now, so much of my I'm sorry if I'm rambling too much, but so much of my production process is done starting with drums because I just need something to play along with in the tempo of my song. But now I can just kind of noodle around on some keys and some synth parts and then just capture it, and Live already knows what the tempo is somehow. And I don't have to rely on that like initial like kick drum or metronome to get me going, which I don't always find very inspiring. So I love that. I don't have to think too much about like tempos and BPM. I can just kind of play, and then Live's like, oh, you were playing like 92 BPM. Here you go.
Absolutely. But it's exactly what you say, like this, I think in a way it's kind of very clever psychology, because I was talking about this in my seminar yesterday. Like, I'm so guilty of kind of finding a little riff or a little beat or something I like, and then putting on the metronome, counting it in and pressing record, and then I don't do it again. I just don't capture what it is that I originally had. And then I spend 10 minutes trying to get it, and then I give up, and then I start something else. And I guess it's because you have this kind of pressure of repeating something. And I don't know, but it happens all the time for me. And also setting the tempo, saying, okay, today I'm going to write something in 126 BPM and typing that in, and then going and then you're kind of stuck there already before you. But now having this capture, and I'm really enjoying like kind of looping up a little beat and kind of scrolling through presets or my own like packs and things I've created, and just kind of noodling around on my push or a keyboard. And every time I get something that worked, press capture, save it, start another track, do the same thing.
Yeah.
And like as a way of getting sound design, it's really, really cool workflow compared to like, loading something up and what shall I play? Okay, I'll play this and record that, and oh no, that didn't work. And it's kind of a bit more carefree, a bit more chilled, a bit more just psychologically really, really works. But no, I agree with you, it's killer. And the whole tempo latch thing, I did this seminar yesterday, and I started playing a beat, and halfway through I was about to demonstrate capture, and I realized like, I'm not actually playing a kind of a simple measured beat here. I'm playing something where the kick replaces the snare at the end, and it's a bit swung. And I was thinking, oh God, what have I done? This is going to go south. and it's the first feature I was showing, but it got it. I have no idea how, but and it got that there was a bit of swing, and it was on a triplet division. I don't know what's going on, and it got the tempo bang on. Like, it was fantastic. So it's a great feature.
That is, I mean, for me, as someone that started playing guitar, I never thought about what BPM I was playing in. Even playing in bands, I never thought about the BPM until I got a computer with recording software on it. I just wasn't the world I was in. We just play, this is about how fast it is. Just play it that way. So when I get into like, computer recording, and I have to say like, all right, well, what is my BPM on this song? I don't know. I got to figure it out, set the metronome up, and, it's just so unnatural. But now it's sort of back to like, just kind of play what you feel. And when I take out my guitar, I might start off playing something fast. Next thing you know, I'm going slow. But when you have to decide like, okay, I got my BPM set to like 110. Now this is what I'm working in. It can be kind of limiting, and it kind of forces you to force your ideas. I get a kick out of what you say at the presentation, though. I've definitely been in that situation where I'm trying to demonstrate a feature, and you kind of realize, like, ooh, I might be testing the limits of what this thing is capable of. But it's nice it worked out for you there.
Oh, yeah, my heart did sink of it. Because, you rehearse and you play with things, and you forget that just because, something seems simple to you, that you don't actually have to go further than that. It is impressive if someone's never seen something before. And yeah, I'm a little bit guilty of perhaps pushing it a bit too hard. But yeah, thank God it all worked out, and it didn't get all kind of weird, because it is 9 times out of 10 if you do play in a weird swing, or it is a computer, so it's only so far it can work out what you're trying to do. And But yeah, luckily it went okay. But yeah, sometimes you do think, oh God, what am I doing? No.
There's nothing worse than like, you're like, hey, I want to show you something really cool, and then it's like, oh wait, it didn't work. Hold on.
Yeah, boom.
It's like, that's so cool, huh? Now I gotta spend my time figuring out why it didn't work. I can't wait.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess at the moment we can play the beta card, but I don't know how far that's gonna sink. But no, it's such an exciting time, and it's really, really, really clever and well thought through. And the collections as well. That's something.
I was just gonna bring that up because I'm excited about that at this moment. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as you're saying, it's like a very simple thing, but it really, really changes kind of the speed at which I can get stuff down, and the not getting out of that flow and going lost in library browsing, depending how you use it, which is of course totally up to you. You can really just keep rolling because you've got everything in one place, and it's kind of intelligently organized, and it's kind of meta. It's from many different folders and many different sources and sample packs and stuff. But but what are you using it for?
Yeah, so just in case anyone doesn't know, Collections is now this part of the browser. It's basically like tagging. So you can tag your different sounds and presets and samples and stuff. So you get like 7 colors, and you can give certain things a certain color. Now, although, I thought it was kind of cool, I really had a hard time figuring out what to use it for. And I heard somebody say they were using it for like emotion. So like, oh, this is like mellow, this is happy, this is sad. And I liked that idea, but I realized right away that like my sounds and samples don't sound happy or sad until I start playing melodies with them. So it didn't work out for me that way. But where it clicked was just last week. I was doing, I got all like the hardware synths hooked up, and I make my, use the external instrument device inside of Live, which allows it, in one device, it sends MIDI to your synthesizer, say, and then it also receives the audio, so you can keep all that stuff nice and tidy on one track. So I was making these for my hardware synths, and I was also like labeling my inputs and outputs, which is another great little feature.
Yeah.
So in Live 10, you can label the names of your input 1, input 2, input 3 on your audio interface. So you can call it like, oh, this is, the Korg Volca FM on channel 1. It's always plugged in. Because on my interface, I've got a Focusrite with 8 ins, and I've also got an ADAT wire connected to another 8 ins. So I got 16 different channels. It's very easy to forget which one my synth is on or which one my guitar is going through. So labeling that has helped a lot. But what I did, to get back to the collections, is I started building all these like racks for my hardware instruments where, this never occurred to me either, to take the external instrument device and put it inside an effect rack. And I don't know why I never thought of that, but I just didn't. So I made my effects with like filters and delays and stuff, and I was saving them, and I was like, oh, hardware should be one of my collections. So I've got a category for my hardware stuff. So any external effects, any external synths are all in there. So I just click there, I find it, drag it on a track. I'm good to go. And from there, everything just sort of unfolded. I made like a drums one where it's like kind of like my favorite drum instruments. One for synths, which is just like synths I like, presets I like. But then I made one for like video tools. So like some of the Isotonic Studios stuff that I've been using for video. I made one, and this is probably the most exciting one. I just called it Try Me. And Try Me is just like, like you collect plugins and presets and sounds, and you hardly ever get a chance to get to use them. So when I get something new that I'm excited to try, I put it in Try Me. So now like when I'm kind of like, oh, I want to mess around with some of this new stuff I got, it's all there. Instead of like, where did it save? What was the new thing I got? So I've got like a lot of mileage out of things I haven't used yet or in a while. They're all in Try Me. It's kind of like, hey, you haven't played around with this new VST you bought. So it's like a reminder, like, hey, don't forget, you've got this thing. You just spent $50 on it.
Oh, that's a really cool idea. And
so,
that kind of gets you away from having folders that are like new, or really new, and all of this stuff.
Right.
Because it's flexible, right? Once you've finished trying it, I guess you can, click the color away, and then it's not in Try Me anymore. It's part of your normal kind of like library. But that's a really good idea. I haven't thought of that. That's really, really smart.
Yeah, it just kind of unfolded after I did the hardware one. It just took the one category to click, and then they all kind of made sense. Like I have one just called like utility, and that one is just like, I'm very often like using the same like channel strip devices I've built, or like filters or something. So like the effects that I use a lot on different things all go in there. And I think I also put like MIDI sequencing stuff. So I've collected a ton of things from like K Devices puts out some cool sequencing stuff. Isotonic, of course. All of these things like that I can like use to sequence MIDI that you start to forget about as your library gets bigger and bigger. You lose track of everything. So these are like, it's like, oh, this was a cool thing. Let me put it in this little spot here so that I just remember that I have this cool thing. Because I can't tell you how many times I've done, found something and either never even used it or used it once and be like, oh, one day this is going to be great in a track, and then forget all about it.
100%. And it gets you access to it. But I really like the approach you've taken to it because, we're all like, we're all kind of just making it up as we go along with this. in in the live community and certainly the trainers community. So it's really interesting to talk to other people and find out what they're doing with this, because it's kind of surprising takes that you can have on these collections idea.
Yeah, I was surprised myself. I was like, oh my God, that's what I need it for. As soon as I thought of it, I was like, aha. But, for a while I didn't know. What do you use it? What do you use it for? Have you figured anything out that works?
I've kind of went through a few different amalgamations of what I should use it for, and started off with the most typical, bass, drums, instruments, blah blah blah. But I found that didn't really work for me. There's so many other ways to access that in live, with the sounds category or my own sample library that's already kind of fairly organized, I guess, which side note is so important to do. But I found it. I'll read them to you. So like the top one, I've got demo, which is just like where I put things for demos or projects or classroom stuff or school.
Oh, smart,
and I'm going to use that as like my flexible category. So depending what I'm doing next in my life, if I've got to give a lecture on something, I can use this. So that's going to be like a flexi collection that changes as I change. And then straight under, I've got incidental, and this is killer for me because I often get loops down and vibes, and I start a composition up, and then I get lost trying to find white noise and impacts and all this kind of like spice that isn't important but actually is really, really, really important to get a sense of like progression in your composition. So incidentals, just got loads and loads of
that's a great idea.
Kind of falling stuff, rising stuff, atmospheres, and so that's all there, and I can just grab it and keep composing. And then I got
and that's a good one, not to interrupt you, but that's just so good because like you said, that's a spot where you can easily get caught up in like, all right, let me pull out a synth, white noise, all right, let's move the filter, let's add like all of those steps sucks you out of the creative moment, and really what you're just trying to do with a transition, and those could even be placeholders for now, just like, hey, something's happening, and give you the feel of like a new part happening. I'm gonna probably use that, or maybe that'll be part of my utilities stuff to throw in, just those, because I've made plenty of instruments and sounds and samples of like cool changes, but they're scattered all over the place on my hard drive. So I like that one. That's really cool.
And you always find, you always think, okay, where was that folder with that killer white noise transition? Was it here? Yeah. No, it wasn't. Was it here? Oh wow, what's that? Oh, maybe no, I won't. Blah 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 blah. And this, I really find this useful to just keep rolling, because as you say, it can be a placeholder. Maybe you want to come back and nerd out and make the best white noise riser ever from scratch, but sometimes
but
you just
when you're making the song.
No, exactly. Yeah. Not when you're just trying to get a musical idea out there.
You're not wearing that hat right now.
Totally. You're not in that mode. And this helps me keep. But I've got one called interesting, which is just like, when you're scrolling and you're looking for something and you're like, you hit a sample and you're like, whoa, damn, I could go crazy with this. Like, whoa, this is a whole song in this sample. But then that that's something else. You're specifically looking for whatever, a guitar chord or something. And so I've got this category, so when I stumble across this, like, wow, this sample's amazing, I can just kind of put it in this place. So next time I'm like, got a beat and I'm like, okay, where now? And I'm all dry for inspiration, then I can just jump into this interesting category and grab that.
Smart. Yeah.
And over that I've got sub of course. And my music is kind of very world music influenced and very glitch. So I've got that. I've got world and glitch. So that once I've got a kind of very basic composition going up, I can put that spice and that personality on top of it without. But yeah, for me, this is all about not getting lost. This collections and just keeping the flow up.
Very cool. And sub, you mean like bass, I guess?
Yeah. Like 808 hits and kind of sub instruments, because
comes up a lot.
Totally, and I don't really make trap where the sub is right at the front of the picture, so it's kind of a utility thing. You need it there, and you need the stuff going on, but at the same time, it's never going to be the hero of the picture. So it's good to just grab it and keep going, and not get distracted with like, is it going to be a really distorted fat sub or a really chilled out one? Or for me, it's kind of it's something that has to be there, and if it's not there, you really notice it. But My music isn't about the sub necessarily.
Yeah, I gotcha. But yeah, I'd say the same thing about me too. But how often do I then like have to get something in there that I need to use? Luckily for me, a lot of times just the default operator is perfect. It's just the sine wave. But yeah, that's a great idea too. I love the interesting idea because I get that a lot. And maybe Try Me is a little bit like that for me. My category Try Me. But the idea like, oh, that's cool, but not now. You know, let's not get sucked in there yet. Let's put that away for later. Yeah, I guess like the theme I'm seeing with you and maybe for me too is like you're trying to reduce the distraction time. So like, what are some of the things that you do a lot of? Why do you have to hunt them out of your browser every single time you're doing it? Or worse yet, probably is like recreate it every time when you can just drop some like noises, some risers in there and then move on. And then like you said, later on, if you want to do that ultimate white noise crazy thing, cool. But to recognize like, hey, this is like a thing I do a lot, and it can very easily become the thing that sucks you out of the moment if you you know, keep getting caught up in that. So
100%.
Staying focused, yeah. I love it. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear how the approach on these. I'm not sure. Sometimes I wish there were more than 7. Like you can do up to 7 different collections.
Yeah.
But maybe it's also a good thing too that it is limited, because otherwise I'd probably have like 35.
Exactly.
Then,
yeah, that's a
then
good
I'm
point.
back to where I started. You know,
It just becomes another sample library, I guess. That's a good point. But I had thought, like, oh, it'd be nice if I could, because I've run out now and I kind of don't have a drums one. So I'm thinking, that would. But yeah, then it would just get kind of meta. But like tinfoil hat time, I really think this is interesting in terms of the future of DAWs and of Ableton Live, maybe, but just like the technology in general, because I think AI is going to become a big thing in it. And I think it's going to go along the lines of predictive text. I think as software and algorithms and processors develop further, I think our software is going to start suggesting stuff. It's going to learn what kind of sound we use at what time, like what kind of, you know, what our routine is, and where we go with that, and kind of what we typically do. I think it's going to start analyzing. You know, it's going to get very clever, and perhaps it'll do it on a cloud basis and compare it to other producers that perhaps identify as similar to you. And I think that is going to be amazing. I think, you know, to get to a point and have suggestions pop up that are actually personal, and actually kind of make sense. Maybe like samples you use a lot, or, you know, maybe they'll have some way of metadata tagging stuff automatically without you having to do it. I really think this is the future, and I think it's in like creative programs and industries, it's going on because, you know, being an artist is more about what decisions you make rather than like always reinventing the wheel. And, you know, if a computer can learn the kind of decisions you generally make, then of course it could become an echo chamber, just like a Facebook algorithm is doing at the moment. But maybe if there was a fine balance, it could really, really just help you, you know, do what we're talking about, not get distracted, make the right decisions at the right time, and kind of plow on and finish ideas. So I think this collections, it could be like the start of something very, very, very interactive and interesting. Maybe the kind of, if it's, you know, one day begins to save the things we put in collections and understand why, then this technology could be building up. And yeah, become something really cool. Kind of scary, but I think it's cool.
It is. It's a pretty fascinating idea. I've never really thought of it like that. But like, okay, you're about 20 minutes in. It seems like it's time for your bass part, or it seems like, you know, that's pretty interesting. Who knows? As it gets to know what we do, collects all that data. I also get that kind of like creepy, weird feeling that like, is our music making going to become so predictable now too, in that case? Like, where everyone's just kind of doing the thing that AI is like, oh yeah, you should probably do this, and you're like, yeah, you're right, that's a good idea, instead of maybe fumbling through something new and different that you wouldn't have ordinarily tried. But that's pretty. I think you're probably right. I mean, isn't everything going to AI anyway? So why not? Some of our workflow, some of our habits. Definitely an application I haven't thought of, but yeah, I can see that for sure.
It is totally terrifying though. Like someone could kind of hack your creative identity and start like making your music better than you. It's it kind of really like it could be. Do you really want to give that part of yourself away? As we've given so much to technology and the internet, like it is a bit scary. And like you say, it could end up for really generic, obvious music. But who knows? But I know there's all this investment from Apple and other companies in this area, and I haven't seen it come to fruition really yet. So something is cooking for sure.
I agree. Who knows what? But I think you're right. Kind of crazy times. Yeah, I guess that's like gonna make it all the more important to like do things you're not supposed to do. Like, I don't see AI say unplugging my guitar while it's in the amplifier and sticking the cord against something metal to get a crazy buzz sound. That'll work out in my track. So I'll have to. Well, it'll really. What makes music human will have to be like all this like weird like no, you're not supposed to do that kind of stuff.
It could get so cool though. That's such a good point. I mean, yeah, like people will be going, man, that sounds so human, and that sounds so failed, and that would be like a real positive thing one day, to think, like you didn't see this coming, did you, computer? I'm just gonna, throw some pillows on my drum kit now. I don't know. It could be really punk in the end.
Well, David Byrne from Talking Heads. His book, forget what it's
How
called.
Music Works.
Thank you, How Music Works. You read it?
Yeah, it's killer.
So he talks so much about like the idea that like music has to be familiar enough that like we recognize, it's just crazy notes everywhere, we can't get into it. But it also has to surprise us enough that it's not boring. And there's this fun thing. And I ever since I read that, it really clicked in my head that like a lot of times when I hear a song, and it's the surprise that gets me, but it's also those familiar melodies that like I hear a song once and like I can already sing along with it. But if it's too obvious, you're like, this is generic. I already know this track. So I love that idea, and like maybe we might have to really be thinking about that stuff in the future if what you're saying actually comes true.
Yeah, and finding that kind of happy medium, but it's very true what you're saying. What Byrne said about that fine line between pop and jazz, that we're all trying to strive for, where it has to be kind, like it's like making a lot of sound design. It can sound like a complete mess and completely unmusical and just random, and the brain can't even like comprehend it. Or it can be like Tipper or Mr. Bill, or an artist that has really cerebral music, but kind of still somehow makes it catchy and just repetitive enough to keep you there, but still kind of challenge you a little bit. And for me, that particular point is like the most inspiring thing in electronic music. But yeah, like you say, it's a really, really fine line, and hopefully we'll be able to understand that better than a computer can.
Right. Well, that kind of brings me to something of yours I wanted to ask you about anyway, because this is pretty human. You've got this series of videos, I think it's 3 acts, called Drip.
Yeah.
And now I want to ask you to explain it, but just so the people listening know, this is something you're not going to see a computer do, because you're playing around on push doing, I don't know what, you're going to tell me in a minute, but there's another guy making coffee. And I guess you're dealing with his sounds and stuff, and that's, I guess, a good example where AI is not going to be like, how about for this track, I just make a cup of coffee and so yeah, maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. Now that I'm aware of your drama background, I find it interesting that you've put this into acts, like almost like a play. So yeah, can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, unfortunately, the videos are a little bit lo-fi, and it's before I bought a fancy camera, so yeah, they're a bit rough. But it's actually like version 2 of a project that I think I'm gonna keep rolling with as long as I can imagine. And I've been a barista for like most of my adult life. A lot of the jobs I've had have been making coffee. I love it. It's great to get out of the studio and hang out with the normal people, and do something with your hands and do something kind of practical that gives someone a good feeling and is a very kind of positive, calmer job. But yeah, like I kind of started thinking about my routine as making coffee as kind of like a composition in a way, a dance maybe. But certainly started thinking that, something like coffee or cooking or wine or cocktails, it involves many similar thought processes to composing music. You kind of assemble your raw ingredients, you kind of process them in certain ways, and through an understanding of the material you're working with that you develop over time, you begin to get an aesthetic you could call it like an aesthetic level that you have to hit all the time. You challenge yourself to be good, and you decide aesthetically what is good and what is bad, and you try and recreate that. And so in a funny way, I started realizing that when I was making coffee, I was kind of like, almost like playing the 12-bar blues. It's the same pattern over and over again, but tiny little changes can kind of have big effects. And yeah, I guess I could philosophize of it a lot, but I just thought I'm going to make some music with coffee. So I tried it once, and I used some really cheap contact mics, and I had a guy making filter coffee, like a V60, with some contact mics underneath, and that didn't go very well. I had like beats playing in the background, and I realized that, sometimes you got to take a good idea and just keep it super simple. So the one that you can see on YouTube, it's my friend Theo, who's a really great barista and coffee roaster from France. And making just coffee after coffee after coffee. And the pot has got a hydrophone in it, so like a waterproof microphone that really nicely captures this kind of dripping, bubbling sound, and as well as all the banging of him putting things on the table and picking it up. And so technically it was pretty difficult to work with electronics and water, and it was we had to like wear rubber shoes and make sure nothing bad happened. But I took that feed from the microphone and I basically ran it through lots of instances of corpus, as well as some kind of tuned EQ8s, or maybe like a resonator or some reverb. And I found that one source sound, and really it could be anything. It could be white noise, it could be the wind, or a cityscape, anything really. You can do a lot with that in Ableton Live very, very simply. And so yeah, I've got 3 little acts. One's kind of very ambient, and the other one's I've used the MIDI of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata to trigger corpus and kind of keep it in key. So the coffee is kind of playing Beethoven, and then there's a techno-y one at the end. But yeah, it was kind of half a laugh and half something I just wanted to do, but it started making me think, is this guy a performer? This barista who's just making coffee? He's not a musician. He had no idea really what he was doing, like what I was doing. He thought it was fun and funky and different, but he had no concept of how Ableton Live works or what a resonator is. He just, he was along for the ride. And I was thinking, well, if I took him away, there's no music. So he's certainly a musician of some sort, and he's on the stage center, and so he's the kind of focus. He's doing something physical. I'm just playing with this black box I call a push, and no one really knows maybe what it is or what I'm doing, but they can see what he's doing. So he's kind of telling the story, and yeah, I guess my drama background just started scratching its head and going, what the hell is this? Like, what's happening? So yeah, that's what it is. And next I'm going to mic up a coffee machine in a coffee shop and just kind of jam along with that, for an espresso machine rather. And just kind of jam along with that and maybe see if I can do some audience interaction of some kind. But yeah, it's a nerdy project. So I'm glad you stumbled across it. It's a bit random.
Yeah, well, I like that kind of stuff. So you're just recording directly into Live whatever he does, and then you grab those samples or clips and you're manipulating them afterwards? Or is it like a live
I'm not even
thing
recording it.
You're not even recording it. You're just monitoring the input, I guess.
Totally, yeah. It goes straight through my sound card preamps and then into live, and then resonators kind of playing with them live. And all of the sounds you hear, I think apart from a kick drum at the end, is from the coffee. So, I have many different tracks all receiving the same input source, the same coffee sound. And you can use like many different effects. I use the buffer shuffler to kind of make a rhythmic kind of thing go on as a beat, and a distorted resonance to do some cool bass stuff, and reverb with resonance to make some kind of high-end piano-like sounds. But it's all from the coffee, and all of the sound you hear is coming from that.
That is so cool.
Kind of random, but I really enjoyed doing it, and it was cool to work with like a non-musician, and really refreshing to hear them. He started tapping on things and really getting into it, and it was cool to kind of to let someone be good at what they're good at and kind of hack that somehow and make music out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's like, so many of us run on coffee to begin with, and now you're running music. You're running, Ableton Live on coffee. So cool. Yeah,
That's
I'll
sweet.
definitely put like links to that in the show notes and put the video up.
Nice one.
That would be nice for people to see, because it's, that, again, to take our humanity back from the machines, that is something you're not going to be able to have a machine do. At least, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's working on that robot yet, but that's a really cool idea. And the results are very interesting. It's very cool. Like, it seems almost like magic when you're watching it. You're just like, wow, this is insane. Like you see where it's coming from, but then like what happens is just really interesting.
Oh, cheers. I'm glad you liked it. And
Totally. I love it.
And I definitely think there's a lot to be said about synchronicity. Like a lot of the time when we perform as electronic musicians, we're just kind of standing behind a laptop. And unfortunately, there's not many better solutions to that. And unless you really, spend a lot of time kind of perfecting that art, because it's a different art. But I think there's a lot to be said about hearing and seeing something happen simultaneously and letting the brain make that connection, that somehow like this, the dripping of this water is, you can hear it as well as see it. I think it's why like visuals and light shows can be so important, because it does something to the human brain. And then you can also play with that a little bit, pretend that someone's hearing what they're seeing, and then slowly unravel it that they're actually not, they're hearing something else. But certainly if for the performers listening, I think it's really important to consider how you visually interact with the sound that you're making, and that an audience can really buy into that a lot better. You can see a drummer hit the drums, what's going on, you could maybe even mime it yourself. And, guitarist, Pete Townsend doing his windmill guitar thing. You can see it's so exciting to watch, because it's like it's synchronous between the physical and the auditory. And I think we standing behind a laptop with controllers that are a bit abstract and square, we can kind of lose that a little bit. And I think it's why a lot of DJs overdo the kind of the hot knobs and the big twist of the filter, because
it's my whole body to turn the knob.
And not kind of pointing anyone in particular, but it's a thing. It really is a thing. And I think it's because we crave performing somehow, and we want to engage our audience, and we know that it's very important for them to be along this physical journey with us. But we don't really have anything to play with. We're just pressing play, and if we do any more than that, then we have to be very, very focused to not screw up this composition that we've spent so long doing. So there's that trade-off between improvisation and danger, and pressing play and actually presenting your work as a studio artist. So we're stuck. We don't really know what to do, and especially if you don't sing, because obviously singing solved this problem completely. And and you can have a laptop and a voice, and it can be a killer show as it is. But that was one way of thinking of it. And maybe if I ever do a tour, I could like bring a coffee soloist along and and get them playing the lead lines or something.
Now, did anyone drink the coffee that you made?
Yeah, we serve it afterwards.
That's so cool.
and we hope that that's healthy. We thought, I wonder where this hydrophone has been, but they're all still alive. So, But yeah, and then you get to like taste
Taste the music.
The process. And
Yeah.
somewhere in Poland, I've heard there's this guy this kind of old electroacoustic guy that he has an espresso machine, and I've been told when you buy a coffee, you also get like a tape of the sound of your coffee being made.
No way.
And that's like his thing. And I just thought that was amazing and like so kind of beautifully pointless and wonderful.
Yeah.
So that really pushed me in that direction.
But you got me thinking. I mean, it would almost be like a cool coffee shop to go visit, right? Where as your coffee is being made, like it's providing the music for the coffee house itself that all the people are, sitting around drinking their coffee, having conversations to. It could be like a really awesome, like kind of almost an art installation, yet still a hangout where you could obviously pay close attention to what's going on, or just hang out and have your drink.
And just read the newspaper or something.
Yeah. This you should open a coffee shop, man.
man.
And like you'll provide the music, and your friend can do the coffee. It's just a fun thing.
It could be killer. It could be
Right?
killer, and a really psychedelic place to be. I mean, imagine that on a hangover. It'd be so funny.
Yeah. Just I would dig that. I would totally show up every once in a while for a coffee. It's just another layer of enjoyment. A lot of coffee shops will have live music anyway, and this is like now the coffee's turn.
Yeah, it's a really shine, and out with the jazz trio and in with the contact mics and the
now
processing.
the Colombian beans are going to perform this ambient improvised piece.
Man, that could be so cool with a slight kind of I don't know, cumbia vibe going on in the background, maybe to go with the Colombian origin. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that would be cool. If only there was enough time in the day and enough and unlimited resources, right?
That's it. Yeah, if you could like clone yourself or have an extra lifetime.
That's cool. So listen, Merlyn, I want to be respectful of your time, and you've been so generous already. We're approaching 2 hours now.
Yeah.
But I want to just ask you, before we part our ways, is there anything you're working on that you want people to know about? Anything you want them to check out? Places to go?
Yeah, totally. Really busy time for me actually. Like years of work is just kind of boom coming into fruition. So I've got my first album coming out on Iboga Records, which is like a dream come true. They're a big part of the psychedelic trance community, and I'm a bit of a secret psy-trance head. And although my music is pretty downbeat and chilled out, but yeah, so they signed me up for this album, and I actually finished this a good few months ago now, but that should be out at the beginning of February, and on Iboga Records. And it's it's been a real ride to kind of piece together something that's somehow cohesive and works together. So that's called Samosa Solar System. And I think it's coming out the 2nd of February, I do believe.
Okay.
And also I've got a course coming out soon with Warp Academy, where we both are trainers and content creators. And it's called Granular Glitches and Grains, Granular Sound Design. So it's going to be a good 2 hours plus of kind of in-depth sound design stuff with granulator and beat repeat and kind of micro loops, and I'm really into glitches and the aesthetics of failure. I just find it fascinating. So that's been a real ride to get that sorted, and it's soon going to be ready. And obviously, with the Warp Academy team and Drew Vespers, there's been we've spent a lot of time together collaborating and trying to get this to be cool. So I'm really proud of it, and the album as well. So it's kind of one of those awesome times where you've been working your butt off for so long in your bedroom and your studio, and then like everything just kind of gets released, and you're like, wow, whoa.
That's cool.
You don't stop to think I did that, and then it goes.
Right.
So those are the two things on my horizon.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to. If you have any links, I can put them in the show notes for that, for the music, where people can check that out. And I agree with you. With Warp Academy, one thing I will say, I did the Push 2 course, and there is a high standard of quality, no doubt. And really pushed me to new limits as far as producing videos go, editing, and Drew Vesper spent a lot of time with me personally, just teaching me about my camera, and I'm really appreciative of that because that's not really my world. The video stuff, it's kind of fun to deal with, but in truth, it's not the thing I enjoy the most. And he was really helpful in, just teaching me how to be more efficient and some tricks on, and the quality control is top notch, and that's why, their work is so good.
100%. And I'm just like you, I got into this camera thing and Drew really helped me because it's not my forte at all. And if I had another life, I'd love to go there, but I don't. But like the guy is so kind of kind and smart and sharp, really sharp dude, and incredible to work with because like you say, these standards are really, really high, and it takes quite a good bit of effort to get there. But as a content creator and an educator, you just get so much out of trying to hit those high standards and kind of produce work that really is going to stick out because it's a real jungle out there. There's a lot of things happening in this online education world, and it's really nice to be part of a company that kind of really, really wants to be at the top and is willing to do that through hard work and collaboration. So yeah, it's been a real journey, and it's a great company to be part of.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot myself, again, as the teacher doing all the learning. Maybe that means I'm a bad teacher.
Yeah, maybe we should give
I
this up.
don't want to learn anything.
Maybe we should be students again.
Right.
That was totally a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, so that's cool. I look forward to that because I love that glitchy stuff. I mean, I'm not really making like a glitch hop thing or anything, but a lot of glitch music, the techniques I find really fascinating, and I like to use them probably to a much lesser degree than the genres would, but I really do enjoy like sprinkling that stuff in there because I think the glitches, the mistakes, the errors are another form of like, in a weird way, humanity, even though it's a lot of time like digital mistakes. But a lot of like the cool digital glitch sounds you get are because you as the human did something wrong. And I like that a lot. It's kind of just like, it sort of brings, it's like digital humanity or something. I don't know. But I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
So I look forward to seeing your thoughts on that.
Wicked. Yeah, and it's going to be great. And yeah, I think it's in a weird sense, like these glitch things, they remind you that you're listening to a computer-based composition. They like break that fourth wall in a way that you talk about in theatre, letting the audience know that they're watching theatre and it's not real. It's a play. And yeah, glitch, I think even in tiny little doses, like tiny little bits here in hip hop or in pop music or whatever, it can really, just like in the right place, it can really kind of play with the listener's perspective of what it is they're hearing. And that's a really good thing, a really powerful thing as a composer to do.
Amen to that. I agree. Well, let's see. Anything else? I don't know. A lot of great stuff in this conversation. Thanks so much.
Sweet, man. Time's just flied. I can't believe we've been here 2 hours, actually.
Yeah. I took a lot of notes and a lot of little lessons for me and inspiring things to share with students. So
Likewise.
Walking away with quite a lot myself. So even if either no one listens or no one learns anything, I have learned quite a lot. So there's
right
a
back at
success
you.
from me.
And I'm totally going to steal your collections idea, but it's all good, right?
Oh yeah. I'm
sharing
gonna
is caring.
I intend to make a video kind of explaining like my thought process behind it, and I have a feeling that some of what I've learned from you will make it in there. So
Sweet.
a little thank you for that. Yeah, some great ideas with just trying to reduce the time spent doing things that could either be refined better later or that just need to happen quick so you can move forward. And that's so important because how hard it is to stay focused and inspired and in that zone can be really challenging. And anything we can do to remove those little bumps is could very well be the difference between finishing a track and not finishing a track.
100% agree, and yeah, and the key to kind of getting there very much. But anything we can do to cut out that obstacles is I think a real bonus, even if it takes a little bit of discipline or hard work. But no, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, man. It's always fun to shoot the breeze with someone who's doing what you're doing, even if they're on the opposite side of the world and in a totally different city. It's fascinating how much we can all have in common in this music production world.
Yeah, it sure is, and we all have a lot to offer, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do the podcast myself, was just a good excuse to talk to people. And a funny thing I've learned along the way is that I don't always get the time to have these conversations with the people that are actually like in my life near me all the time, because life is so crazy, and to sit down with people for just solid conversation and nothing else is great. My phone is off right now. I'm not getting like notifications. Yeah. It's just in the zone. That's so important, and I think we learn so much from that.
100%.
And in our world today, I think we have to carve out time to make that stuff happen, because I think we started on this earlier, where everyone and technology and everything is trying so hard to take more and more of our attention away from everything else. So and getting us kind of further away from exactly what we're talking about now, which is not checking your social media and having a human conversation with a real human being live. Yeah, it's getting rarer and rarer, but it's a beautiful thing. But we will overcome the robots. We will grow out of this adolescent phase and hopefully learn to use technology with a bit more mindfulness. Yeah, I mean, the Terminator movies were scary, but the people won. Yeah, the people won. And apparently they weren't scary enough, because no one's learned about Skynet yet. Right. So is there a good place for people to go check you out, like a kind of main hub that you prefer, or like other places you like? Where can we tell people to go? I'm sure they want to know more about you after this conversation. Yeah, like at the moment, with the album not out yet, there's not so much out there. SoundCloud/Merlyn with a Y. I'm that old that I managed to get there and get that. Yeah, that and get like just my name at the end, revealing my age. But go pop onto SoundCloud and check out my tunes, and also on YouTube if you want to have a look at that little video of the coffee that you mentioned, and I'll drop you some links to that as well. Oh, thanks. Yeah, and I'll definitely put that in with the post as it goes up too, so people can check it out there. Cheers, also, I'll Brian. Put all these links in there. So yes. So Killer. Thanks so much, everybody. This has been Merlyn Silva. He is you're in Denmark now, right? Okay. Yeah. But because you're in my computer, as far as I can tell. But he's doing some great stuff. Really awesome videos. Really nice way to explain things. So if you're learning techniques, especially in live, but through some other basic music production stuff, here's a guy with some good energy and good thoughts and a nice kind of philosophical tie-in with everything, which I like a lot. And part of the reason I was happy to talk to you. So check out Merlyn Silva. I'll put all the links inside the show notes, or go to SoundCloud/Merlyn, which is it's like Joe at Twitter, right? Like a great score. So thanks again, Merlyn. I really do appreciate it. Oh, cheers, Brian. It's been a real pleasure to be on your show and have a chat to you. It's been such a laugh. And thanks to everyone else for listening and dropping in. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Have a great rest of the day.